Hi, this is Michael from Music Ministry 101, a resource of training videos for cantors, instrumentalists, and music directors. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing or visiting us at musicministry101.com. Okay, welcome to part 2 of How to Read Music. If you missed part 1, please check the description and go back to part 1 because we covered these things which you're going to need from now on. In part 2, we're going to be covering these things. Let's begin. We're going to start by taking a look at different forms of notes and talking about some vocabulary. So here's a regular quarter note. At the bottom, there's a head, which is the dot, the filled in circle there, and above it is the stem. Now, sometimes notes have no stem, like this whole note has no stem, and the head is not filled in. So you might see different versions, which we'll discuss in later videos. Also, notes could have a flag attached to the stem, like this eighth note, or a note could have a dot following it, which changes the value. And finally, notes could be barred together, such as these two eighth notes on the left and those 4/16 notes on the right. So what you need to know is the terminology head, stem, flag, dot, and beam. Okay? Make sure you remember all of those things or go backwards and look at this part of the video again. Okay, now all notes that have a pitch have a letter assigned to them. You might have heard someone say, oh, that note is an F or this is an A. You might already know a little bit about that. So the letters aren't all of the letters of the alphabet, but they are the letters of the musical alphabet, which are here. They go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Now, it doesn't just stop there, but it repeats going higher and lower. So the note above G is an A again, followed by B, C, D, E, F, G, and the note after that G is another A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and it goes on, higher and lower. So as we go towards the right of, let's say, a piano, the notes are going higher, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, F, G, and as you go lower, the notes are going backwards in the musical alphabet. Okay, so now we know about the musical alphabet. We're going to see how these notes land on the staff. Okay, this section is very important. I'm going to show you how to identify the notes on the treble clef and the bass clef. So here we have a staff, 5 lines and 4 spaces, with a treble clef. That symbol there is called a treble clef, also known as a G clef. You can kind of see that it kind of looks like a G, almost in cursive with its own kind of style. And what this treble clef tells you is where the G note falls onto the staff. So you can see the note on the right hand side is at the middle of the treble clef where the red little dot is. So you can look at any treble clef and say, oh, it's circling that second line, which is a G note. That note will always be a G, and that's why the treble clef is also known as the G clef. So what happens above this G note right here? Well, as we know from the musical alphabet, the note above the G is an A, where it starts over again, followed by a B, C, D, E, F, and so on. What note is below the G? You have to go on the left side of the musical alphabet. Below the G is an F note, followed by an E note. So these are all of the notes of the treble clef. Now, as we know from our first video, if you continue up higher or lower on the treble clef, all you do is add ledger lines so that you can continue to show what line notes and space notes are. Now, most melodies that we might see are written on the treble clef or G clef. It's a very singable range for women, and men can sing the same notes an octave lower. Let me show you one other clef for today, which is a lower clef. It's basically below the treble clef, and this would be common for, let's say, a male voice like a tenor or a bass singing in a choir. Also lower instruments like the trombone, tuba, and so on. There are many, many more. Or also you might see this from a piano player with their left hand often plays the bass clef, while the right hand often plays the treble clef. So treble is higher, bass clef is lower. So the bass clef is also known as the F clef, and here's a picture of it. If you look at it, and this is a stretch, I know, it kind of looks like an F. And I would tell my middle school students that it was a flying F. Because if you connect all of those dots on the right hand side and draw straight lines, it kind of looks like an F. So the bass clef tells you what note is an F note. And it's the single dot on the left hand side, which the bass clef almost circles. That is the F note. So here's an F. We've got one with a stem down, one with a stem up. It doesn't matter because it's the note head that tells you what note it is. And you can know for sure that that is an F note on the fourth line from the bottom. So, same questions as before. What note is below the F note in the musical alphabet? Well, if you go back a letter or down, it's an E. If you go down from that, there's a D note. Here I've got a D note with a flag. And you can continue this all the way down. Let's see how low this goes. F, E, D, C, B, A, G. All the way down to a low G. Okay? Now continuing this up, let's start at the F on the F clef. Here we have F. Going up is G. Now the alphabet repeats. The next note would be an A. Okay? Okay, and now for a little bit of review for you. So, here's the first question. Take a look at these random notes on the staff. What notes are those? Okay, if you're a little bit confused, I understand why. Well, there's no clef there. So the clef is going to determine what notes those are. Take a look with the treble clef. We know that the treble clef circles the G note on the second line, which means one note lower than that in the space would be an F. So those notes are F, F, G, A on the treble clef. Now what if we had the same notes on the bass clef? Well, the letters would be different. They would actually be different notes because it's on the bass clef. So how to find out what these are? Well, you know the bass clef is called the F clef, and the dot on the left-hand side of the bass clef shows you where the F note is. So to get all the way down there, for now, we're going to have to count before I show you a couple tricks in a later video. So let's look. F, E, D, C, B, A. That first space note is an A. So the notes on the bass clef are A, go up one, B, go up one, C. Now make sure that you understood that and you got it completely. Now is the time to get this sorted out before moving on to part 3. Okay, so I'd like to show you one more thing, which some people have asked me before, my middle school students. Take a look at these notes. The first 3 have a stem going up, and the next 5 have a stem going down. Why is that? Well, the stem up and stem down can be used for a couple different reasons. One, like in this example, is it just looks a little bit better to have the stems all kind of compress into the staff like that. So you could say that the first 3 notes are going up towards the center line, and the last 5 notes are going down, and it makes it a little bit more visually appealing. Now there's also a practical reason for doing this. Let's say that you had a soprano voice singing a higher part and an alto voice singing a lower part. It might look something like this. The soprano voice or voices would be singing all of the stem ups, and the alto voices would be singing the stem down. Sometimes, very rarely, but sometimes those two voices cross over one another. And they can get a little mixed up unless you look very closely at the stems. And you should know that, if you're singing soprano, it would be stem up, or alto, stem down. The same goes for men's voices. If this was on the bass clef, let's say, then the stem up would be the tenor part, and the stem down would be the bass part. So the stems can be a way to help visually compress information and make it cleaner, or to differentiate between two parts. So I hope you've enjoyed this part 2. I know I've enjoyed making it a lot for you. I'm going to start working on part 3 now. I hope if you've liked the video that you can subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up. And if you didn't like the video, please give a thumbs down so I know that I need to change something in the future. Alright, see you at the next video.